and welcome to the SBP Podcast, the voice of mobile film. I'm Susie Botello, your host, and you're listening to episode 48. Hi there, welcome to the world of mobile film. Hope you're all having a terrific day. Are you ready for the tour? Our guest this week is John Woosley. He's going to take us on a tour through his experience shooting and editing his movie, Alex The Firefly, which he shot with a smartphone. He made a 34-minute film, but we asked him to cut it down to 15 minutes for a special screening and presentation during the International Mobile Film Festival coming up on April 27th and 28th in San Diego. We went through all the doors and the windows of the process from pre-production to production and finally to post. The film is a teen love story set in a special time that most of us remember just before our cell phones got smart. And if you don't remember when that was, then that's actually okay because you're going to get a lot from this podcast. I just mentioned our film festival, and that's actually taking place in April. But I wish to really give a big shout out to our sponsors because we're really grateful to them. And some of them are actually collaborating in the planning of our film festival this year. So basically, they rock. Red Giant, San Diego Real Estate Veterans.com, Blackbox.global, Swords and Circuitry Studios, Film Convert, and Grip and Shoot. We also have news coming soon that will be happening a lot over the next few weeks as we get closer to this year's exciting 8th Annual International Film Festival in San Diego. Wow, right? I also want to thank everyone who's been with us through the years. There are so many. I launched the film festival from an idea way back in 2009, so it's been 10 years for me playing in this field, and I love every moment. If you and I, that's you, and I ever meet, I have many stories that I can share with you. We're talking 10 years worth of stories. Now, that's actually our theme this year, by the way, stories. So, are you ready to take the tour? Let's go and talk with John, shall we? Oh, watch your step. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the SBP Podcast. I am here with a special guest. His name is John Woosley. Am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes, you did pretty good. It's Woosley.
Woosley. So John is from Kansas City, and he was just starting to tell me something I thought was really interesting. But why don't you share that a little bit with us really quick, and then I'll tell everybody why you're a guest on this podcast, which is pretty awesome too.
Sounds good. Yeah, so before we started the intro there, you were asking me, was I from Kansas City, Kansas, or is Kansas City somewhere else? Whereas Kansas City straddles the state line between Kansas and Missouri, and I actually live on the Kansas side in a little town called Fairway.
Why is it called Fairway? That's pretty cool.
Yes.
And so there's Kansas City that stretches across 2 states, right?
That's correct.
That's pretty awesome. So do you just kind of play games like maybe as a teenager and go, I'm going to a different state, watch, and just step over the line or something, or?
I mean, you literally can do that. There's a street called State Line that straddles the 2 states, and you can literally bounce back and forth.
That is cool. Do you do it with a skateboard or anything, or just?
I'm too old for that, Susie.
Oh, well, I don't know. Wait till you get to San Diego. We have people of all ages on skateboards here. Well, to our listeners, I wanted to let you know that that the reason we're talking to John, outside of being a really awesome super nice guy. He is a filmmaker, and he's going to be in our film festival because we're doing a special screening of a wonderful little film that he made. It's called Alex and the Firefly, or did I get that wrong?
That's absolutely right.
Okay. And if the name sounds really cool, this is one of those films where the title is really cool, but the film that goes and the story that goes along with it is actually really cool too. I think that on the poster, it says there's a line on there, kind of not really a synopsis, but a slogan almost, right? It says, "First love changes everything." And I'd like to ask you, John, to go ahead and take over now for a little bit and just share with our listeners. I mean, you shot this with an iPhone, and you also edited this film with an iPhone, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah. And the film, I know you had to shorten it a bit for the screening, but originally it was like 34 minutes long, which is quite a doozy to have to edit that on your phone. So share with us a little bit about who John is as a filmmaker, or what got you into filmmaking, and then a little bit about what made you decide to tell this story using your iPhone.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been, like many filmmakers that I'm sure you talked to, have been interested in filmmaking and all my life. And when I was, 12 or 13, to date myself, I guess, it was probably like 2000, 2001 or something. Coincidentally, the same period of time this film takes place in. But, that was right around the time that digital cameras started coming on the marketplace. And, the internet was booming. Everything, you could find any information you wanted on the internet. And internet speed started picking up. People started sharing how they were using digital cameras to make movies. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting, because now, it's not just that I know I want to make movies and that's what I want to do. But I knew that it's actually possible that as, 12-year-old, if I can convince my parents to buy said camera, if I had the camera, there is the technology. You can buy the software and you can make and edit movies at home using digital technology. That's like a game changer, right? And it was a game changer for everyone. And for me, that's what first made it really possible for me to do that. And so, as a kid, I was making little short films and various links and kind of experimenting using the technology. And then I ended up going to University of Kansas to their film school for undergrad. And there I made a feature film called Angel of Music while I was in school. When I went to school as a freshman and sophomore, you could not take production classes, which I thought was silly because, I felt like I already knew a lot, I already done a lot, so why couldn't I take class? And that's the rule, whatever. So I'm like, you know what, I'm going to use my time in school to make my own film, to teach myself. So that's what I did while I was in school. And then after school, I graduated in 2009, and we had this lovely recession, as you'll probably recall. So terrible time to find a job in the industry. I went out to California, did grad school for a year. It didn't work for me. It wasn't the path I wanted to pursue. I ended up moving back to Kansas City, around where I'd gone to school, to be with now my wife. And, I took a different path career-wise. I decided I didn't want to be a starving artist. That was not any interest to me.
I don't think anybody really goes into that as, I'm going to be a starving artist.
No, but there's some people that really try to grind it out. And, for me, I knew what I really wanted to do was make films. And no one's going to say, hey, I'm going to hire you to make a movie.
Yeah, but you wanted to follow your passion though, right?
Yeah, I wanted to still do it, and I wanted to have control over what I was doing. So I went a different path professionally, but continued to do work in that space. So I worked on a kind of a web series with a friend of mine. We did about 8 episodes of that, and that lasted for a couple of years. But it was really like several years before I made another film. Just, obviously it's very time consuming and costs a lot of money. It's the most expensive hobby.
What year was that you were making the web series?
So that was like around, we started in 2011 through 2013.
Cool.
12 or something like that. Yeah. So we're trying to sell it as a TV series, kind of a reality series. And we had an agent and we're pitching it around to different places for a while, but no one was buying. So we just decided, you know what, we're just going to make it ourselves. And we did. We made 8 episodes of it and got a number of viewers. And just the partner I was working on with it, we just decided, after 2 years, we kind of wanted to take it in different directions. So we kind of stopped and parted ways. And obviously we're still friends, but show-wise, we stopped making episodes of the show. And so flash forward a few years later in like 2015, 16, and I started writing again, and I wrote a script that I liked. And I was working with a friend of mine that I'd met in California when I was out there at Chapman, who had produced a couple of my movies out there. And we were kind of kicking the story back and forth a little bit. And she gave me some notes, and I went back to rewrite the script. I'm like, I'm just not invested in these characters. Like, I like this, but I don't really like them enough I'm not invested enough to write another draft of this. And so I started thinking, I want to tell a story. When you think about writing, everyone always says, write what you know. So what do I know? What experiences do I have that I could leverage into a movie that would be enjoyable, that I would want to watch, that other people would want to watch, that I'm not just making a movie to make a serious, dramatic movie that I think I should be making, but something really that's entertaining. So, I that's what kind of led me to kind of call upon some experiences me and some of my friends had growing up to tell a coming of age love story, if you will. And, the iPhone side of this is around the same time, I started reading about how this feature film called Tangerine was shot on an iPhone. I was like, oh, that's really cool. It's not just cool because it's shot on an iPhone, but it's like, here's a successful movie with people that, have access to all kinds of equipment. They don't need to be shooting on iPhones, but they are. And this movie got into Sundance and won a bunch of awards. And so I started researching okay, what, it's not, they didn't just use an iPhone, right? They didn't just turn on the camera app and start recording, right? There's other things they use. There's other equipment they use. So I started learning about that and reading about that. And I was like, oh, it's all really interesting. It's really cool. All this stuff is really attainable technology. And, I got excited the same way I got excited when digital cameras came out, and this whole idea of being able to put video from your camera onto your computer, and got excited in the same way. And that's kind of what led me down the path of, can I actually do this? Can I make a movie on an iPhone? Long-winded answer to your question.
Noticed, yeah, no, this is fantastic because I'm listening to your story and there's all these things coming up, which is going to lead into more questions and take this more in depth for our listeners. For one thing, obviously, and the one thing that I personally know, and it just seems to be, confirmed with everybody that I speak to in these, in the podcasts and in person, and that is that filmmakers in general do like challenges. And I think that you were talking about Tangerine and people who were already, they have the equipment, they have access to cameras and things like that, but they decide to go and do this on a phone. I think the reason they do that is because they find it like a new challenge, like that new exciting feeling that you felt when digital cameras came out and then the iPhones came out, or this whole thing about making movies with iPhones. And so And so I think that's where you that whole part of the story fits in, because you love the challenges. And so that leads me to a few questions. This film, when you see this film, the quality of the film production itself, you can't tell that this was, a typical film that you normally see shot on a phone. It has a very cinematic feel to it, and what I mean by that is that the framing is great, and that you can tell that the director, and that was you, right?
Yes.
Put a lot of care and thought into each shot, and the moving shots were smooth and so forth. Why don't you share a little bit about? Also, you had a lot of outdoor scenes. You had your characters on bikes and things like that. Share a little bit about that aspect of the filmmaking part, and because those things I'm sure were quite challenging for you.
Yeah. So interesting about shooting with an iPhone. So not only was it a challenge, but I am not a cinematographer. I don't consider myself mainly a cinematographer, but at the same time, I feel like, I reread Rebel Without a Crew, Robert Rodriguez's book about making El Mariachi, and which he was basically like a crew of one, right? So he pooled his resources and invested in as few people as possible to get the most out of them. And I was like, okay, I have limited time, limited resources. I'm going to fund this myself. I'm not going to go through a bunch of fundraising and a bunch of people like, I'm sorry, this movie didn't make any money, right? So, in that spirit, I wanted to shoot the film myself. I have worked with some great cinematographers. So I felt like I had enough knowledge to shoot it myself, and that we could pace the shoot at a speed that was comfortable to me to get things looking good and make it look, as you said, cinematic. So, I think it's important listeners know kind of what goes into this, what you can use on the iPhone. The first is, what do you actually shoot application-wise? There's a great application called Filmic Pro, which is what they used on Tangerine, and it's what I use because it gives you the Mac. It kind of hacks the camera, so you get all the controls that you don't normally have access to on the stock camera app from the iPhone. So controlling the shutter speed and the frame rate, which are important to get that cinematic look, because you want to be shooting at 24 frames per second, which is what you see in movies, right, in the theater. And you want to have the shutter speed at 1/48th, right, which is the shutter speed, or 1/46, sorry, that you want to see. Kind of matches the motion you would see from a cinematic camera.
Which so it gives you control. That smooth look.
Yeah, it gives you that smooth look and something you're used to seeing. Because like when you shoot with the iPhone stock application, you're going to see like 60 frames per second, which is like very smooth looking. Like that's how you're looking at a video shot on a camera. It's because of the frame rate is just, it's so smooth. It's not like what you see in a movie. It's not that cinematic feel. So, there's things like that. There's lenses. You can get lenses to go on the camera. So one of the things I did was, there's a company called Beastgrip, which makes this great rig, which allows you to take your phone and attach it to a tripod or, any kind of rig, which is important because you want to stabilize the camera. And add some flexibility they don't normally have just with your phone case itself. So you get the ability to put it on a tripod. You can add microphones or lights or things like that right onto the iPhone itself. Yeah. They sell a adapter that allows you to put 35 millimeter lenses on your camera. So the same kind of lenses you would put on a cinema camera, you can put on your iPhone. So it allows you to achieve like that. The depth of field that you would see in that you're familiar with from close-ups where the background's all blurry, right? You can get those same kind of effects on the iPhone.
And we're
So
not
we used,
talking just for our listeners. I'm sorry. I just because I can see they're visualizing all of this, and they're probably thinking iPhone X or something like that. But you shot it on an iPhone 7.
yes, iPhone 7.
Yeah.
So, but all of these things still work for all of the iPhones. So that's why I like these kind of companies, because they make their add-ons pretty universal. So because the iPhone comes out every year and they had to redesign their products, it would be a nightmare.
It gets to be quite
So
expensive. Yeah.
yeah, so the other thing is lenses. So you can buy lenses to go on the camera. So or the iPhone, one of them is an anamorphic lens, and there's several companies that sell these now. So it gives you that really nice wide aspect ratio, the same aspect ratio a lot of films use. So that's really nice. And then there's other lenses that can allow you to get closer to your subject without needing like a 35 millimeter lens. So lots of things that go into getting that cinematic feel. So it's not just an app. It's not just, it's all of these things put together that make up the rig, if you will, to shoot the film. And then in terms of, everything else is pretty much the same as any other film. It's just a different tool, right? You still need lights. You still need to work with locations. You still need to have permits and insurance and good sound recording and all these other things that go into the movie. The only difference is the tool you're using, right? Which is an iPhone instead of a cinema camera.
And with the B script, it's also a stabilizer.
Right? It is, yeah. And there is also a stabilizer built into the iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
So Filmic Pro gives you the ability to turn that on or off, which helps. It's interesting because for me, this was my first time shooting, a real film on an iPhone. And so it was kind of a learning curve for me as well. And sometimes all this stuff just gets kind of frustrating because it's like, you've got all these different things, like you're kind of cobbling them together to make something that it's not really meant to be, but it can be, and you can make it work. But it can be frustrating at times too. Like the 35 millimeter adapter was a giant pain in the ass. I'm not sure if I can say that, but it was.
Okay.
Would never use that thing again, unless they've made a new version of it. I don't know if it's any better, but it's just you're shooting through. If you think about how many panes of glass you're shooting through,
Mm-hmm.
A lens itself has glass in the front and glass in the back. And then this adapter has glass in the front and glass in the back. And then your iPhone has a lens that has glass. And so you're shooting through all this glass, you're losing all this light for a small incremental gain, right? If you really need all this, shoot with a cinema camera, right? I think next time, I wouldn't use that adapter, just use the lenses that, are easier to work with.
Yeah, and of
so it was
course,
a learning experience.
Of course, actually, I should mention that even though you shot a lot of films outside, there are some indoor scenes, and there are scenes at night in bedrooms and things like that. So you really did need to. I can only now imagine what you had to do with the lights. You really had to up the lights, huh?
Yeah, so outdoor scenes are the most friendly to an iPhone because the iPhone is. It doesn't have great sensitivity to low light situations, so you need a lot of light, which you wouldn't think, because when you use your camera app, it seems like you can shoot anywhere with plenty of light. But what it does is it really adds a lot of grain to the image. So if you want the image to look really nice, you need a lot of light. So outside is easy. You don't need really much modification at all, or if anything, it's really about choosing the right time to shoot. So shooting like around sunup or sundown to get a nice look. In our case, we had some overcast days, so that's easy because you're not really dealing with the sun at all. And then indoor scenes are challenging. And so, one piece of advice that I've read and give others is like when you're shooting a smaller independent film where maybe you don't have a lot of resources, is to keep the frame small. So don't shoot giant indoor scenes if you don't have the ability to light it. Now, I broke my own rule a couple of times. We had big scenes, big dance scenes, and some big scene at a bowling alley where we did show a lot of the background. And I wish, some of those scenes, I wish we had more ability to light. I think they turned out fine, but if we had the means, we could have had better lighting across those really wide scenes. The
Yeah.
scenes that were interior house scenes were really easy to light. So those looked really nice, I think.
Well, you do have to establish the setting of where your characters are, or where the story is taking place, even if it is only just a few seconds, though, you know.
Yeah, and you do, right? And there's ways, if it can be brief, yeah, you can definitely do that with a few lights. There's tricks you can use. There's always stock footage you can use to supplement things you can't show very well. But for us, we didn't have a huge light kit because I wanted everything to be very portable, easy to get around. I wanted all the lights to be able to be operated by batteries, so we didn't have to plug anything in anywhere.
What did you use for lights, by the way?
So there's I think they're Chinese brand called Young. I don't know how to pronounce it. Youngyo or something like that. So they sell some different models of lights.
That film with Mike Myers. We got to be careful how we say this, but maybe you can send the link because that's something that a lot of people in mobile filmmaking don't talk about. I mean, there's a few out there, but there's not enough.
Yeah, so these are LED light panels. So they're very flexible in terms of you can crank them all the way to maximum brightness. You can dim them. You can change the color temperature of the light. Cool. So a lot of flexibility there, and they run off batteries, which is great. And I never ran out of battery. I never even have to change the batteries in the lights, which is amazing.
Wow.
And they also come with remotes, so you can turn them on and off easily with the click of a button between shots, and they're very light and easy to move around. Now we only had 3 or 4 of them. I wish we had like 50 of them because they're smaller lights, so they work well for close-ups in the smaller scenes. You obviously need huge lights to light up very wide spaces, which we didn't have. We did have an extra light, like in the scenes in. We had a scene in a church where there's a dance going on, or a school, if you will, and we just got some Home Depot LED lights to just kind of raise the overall ambience of the entire room. Because like I mentioned, the iPhone is very sensitive to low light situations. So if you're going to crank the ISO all the way down, so that means like the sensitivity of the sensor is not picking up very much light at all, to keep that grain really low, then you need a lot of brightness in the room to expose the image.
Yeah, and
so
it's better to have more light in the scene while you're in production, that you can also, once you're in editing, you can tone that down a little bit if you need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Better than not enough, because then there's nothing there for you to play with.
Yeah, not really. I mean, the iPhone has a little flexibility, but not a whole lot in the image to recover if you over or underexpose.
Yeah. Yeah, if it's too hot, it's the same problem.
Yes.
Now, and also really quick before I jump on something else, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you captured the audio. The audio was good too.
The audio, I wish we had done better.
Well,
so
there's always that.
No, I think it turned out great, but it was a hassle. So one thing, I had a Rode Mic Mini, which plugs right into the iPhone and could go in the hot shoe mount of the B-Script Pro, is what we use to record the audio. And that works well enough in rooms where there's not a lot of echo. It worked, I say well enough. I guess it worked about 40% of the time. But we did have a lot of scenes where we had big rooms, or we knew we were going to add in audio later, or we were filming outside where characters were talking with the wind like blowing really bad. I mean, we had some park scenes where there's a guy on a lawnmower the entire time, just sounded terrible. But I've done a lot of ADR on my films. Most of them I've done ADR on. I'm not afraid to do it because I know how to do it. And it's really not that complicated. So we ended up doing ADR for a lot of the scenes to get the audio sounding really good. And we actually used the same microphone. We just did it in more of a studio-like setting so we could capture really clean dialogue.
And that way it matched as far as because you're using the same mics.
Yeah, so it matched the other scenes, and we had all the actors recording on the same microphone. So, it matched in the scene. It mixed really well. So, most people don't know, you can't tell that there was any kind of audio recording done outside of the scene.
Interesting. So, and you were recording straight into the mic. Now you have a good amount of dialogue in your movie. Did you ever have any syncing issues when you were recording straight into the phone?
So actually, no, we did not from what we recorded live. So what we did was this part of the filmmaking process did happen, I guess, off of the iPhone. But we had I used my computer. There's a free program called Audacity, which is a sound editing program. You may even use it for this podcast.
Well, and it's free too, so.
And it's free, and it works really well. So we just imported all of the audio from the edited scenes, and then we had the actors record their lines as they listen to them back. So that's what I found the best way to do it. So they hear a line, they say a line, they hear a line, they say a line, etc. And then we go back through and do a pass to line everything up. And if it doesn't line up, we do it again. And you just keep doing it until you get all the recordings so everything matches. And you're looking to match not just the cadence, but the performance, or in some cases improve the performance. And most importantly, make sure everything syncs up. But you've got the audio cue from the sound, and you've got the visual, which is a waveform you can see on the computer screen. So you got some things that help you. But there were some times we shot some stuff where it was really windy outside, and only thing we could do is just kind of guess what the actors were saying because we couldn't hear anything at all. Because some of the sound was
Can you
bad.
monitor the sound while you were recording?
You can. I didn't. I had enough going on. I could, I could see that it was recording, but I never listened at the same time.
Okay, because when I shoot, I use a boom.
Mm-hmm.
And I use because the iPhone that I use actually still has the phone jack. I mean, the phone jack,
mine doesn't.
Audio jack. Yeah. But even if you don't, you can get the, I forgot what it's called, the adapter, so that you can attach it through the lightning port. And and I use the XLR cable through the iRig, and by using their app for recording the video, you can actually monitor the audio that you're recording, which makes a huge difference because I was recording video, like during our film festival or Comic-Con or places like that, and it comes in handy to be able to hear it. But the reason I was asking about the syncing is because I've talked to filmmakers who swear that you can't record audio directly on the phone because as you're recording, you're having sync issues later in post-production.
I don't know. I had no problems.
There you go. So I hope they're listening.
I hope they're listening too. I had no problems, and I didn't even listen to the audio while we were shooting it. So
yeah, so awesome. I love it.
No problems.
Now I want to ask you something. You were shooting when you were shooting the bike scenes, because they're like chasing each other on bikes and things like that.
But those aren't. I don't know if we should even talk about that because those aren't even in the cut that we're going to show.
Yeah, well,
in San Diego.
Yeah,
but we can talk about it.
Yeah, you can talk about it anyways because you can blame me during your talk because I made you cut the film shorter. But talk a little bit about that, about getting action shots like that with the iPhone.
Yeah, so we had a couple sequences which you don't get to see at San Diego, but hopefully in some future release of some form or maybe some other festival, you can see the longer version of the film.
Or on Netflix, you never know.
Or Netflix or iTunes or wherever we end up releasing it. We'll release both versions. And I do really like the shorter version. I have to say it works really well as a 15-minute version, and it works really well as a 35-minute kind of pilot presentation. But in the longer version, the film is bookended by a couple of bike sequences, which one of my filmmaking partners that helped a lot on this film told me that these were going to be really hard to shoot. And, you never worry about that when you're writing it. You just figure it out later. But the film opens with the two main characters, Alex and Zach, racing each other to a convenience store on their bikes. And, they race down the street, and that's pretty much the scene. So it's, logistically, it's how do you film this? And you think about how would you film it if you had access to unlimited equipment. You'd probably have a car pacing the actors with cameras in it. You might have like a helicopter for aerial shots or something like that. Obviously, don't have any of these things. What I did have,
no helicopters.
I know, it's surprising. Next time. But what I did have was a convertible at the time, and so I got in the back of the convertible. We opened the roof. And then I just sat in the back of the car, and we drove down the street. We found a street where there was only one entrance. It was a dead end. So we could go down the street, and then the actors could stop, and then we could start over again. We didn't have to worry about traffic. Plus, No one was home at the time we shot this, which was great too. So anyway, I hopped in the back of the convertible. My friend drove, and then I just filmed out the back of the car. So it worked really well for some of the longer shots of the actors, racing down the street. And then for the close-ups, we needed close-ups of the actors, on their bikes, of their faces to get their reaction shots. And when I planned it, I was like, oh, I know, I'll strap a GoPro to either to a helmet or to the handlebars or something like that to get some cool reaction shots. Well, I never got the GoPro. I never bought it. So, go to plan B. Filmmaking is the mother of invention, right? So I just stuck the actors in the back of the convertible and shot them really close up. And so, and just had them kind of, mime like they're riding the bikes. Cool. Really, they're just in the back of my car. You can't even tell because of the way it cuts together really well. But yeah,
I kid you not, guys. You really can't tell. You fooled me.
Yeah, you can't tell. And then, the end, the whole ending sequence, we just, grabbed that basically some of the shots of the same day. And then, we had shots where there was more kids in the frame. The tricky thing was, so we have part of the sequence at the beginning in this first bike race sequence is that Zach, who is the best friend of the main character, Alex, he wins the race because he darts through traffic. And, Alex is too timid to dart across traffic and has to wait for the light to turn green. So, all right, how are you going to have a kid run through traffic? Now, go back to your, filmmaking school and, okay, we're going to have stunt drivers, or we're going to close down the street and everyone's going to be coordinated, and we're going to have, lots of safety.
Paramedics on site.
Police and paramedics and all that stuff. Well, sometimes you don't have all that stuff. So what we did was we waited for the light to be red. So he wasn't crossing against traffic. He was actually crossing with traffic. We just made sure there was no traffic in the shot. And then we added the cars to go across traffic in later as special effects.
Cool. Wow. So, yeah.
And did the same thing at the end. So they're supposed to be going across the street, and the traffic stops suddenly, I'll just say. And to get the traffic stopping suddenly, we added some cars in digitally again. So
very
digital
cool.
effects help out a lot in some cases.
Just goes with that saying, if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I knew someone that was good with effects, and he colored the whole film and added some of the effect shots in. So, and he was able to do that, for us for pretty, very quickly and, not kill our budget. So,
and then you were
resources.
You were, well, I was going to say the other thing, with the paramedics and everything, you definitely don't want to have the parents watching, this whole scene, right?
Right.
I want to share with our listeners the heart of this story. Would you mind going into a little bit about that? What is it about this story that meant so much to you to do everything you did? Because we were just talking about the will and the way and all that. What was it about this story that made you go all out for it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I maybe first to just kind of summarize what the story is, because people may be listening to this thinking, like, what is this movie? Like, what is this Firefly, and who's this Alex guy? So this is a coming-of-age tale of love and loss in the new millennium. I didn't come up with that, but a good friend of mine did, and it's very catchy. And that's what it is. It's about this young man named Alex, and this is his first serious girlfriend. He starts the summer thinking he's going to reconnect with an old friend, someone he's had a crush on for a long time, and he ends up meeting her really good friend, which he falls in love with, and they start having a relationship. And as things do, drama happens, and friendships are tested, and it's just a really good universal story that I think everyone has either experienced or can relate to. So to answer your question of why was the story meaningful to me, I mean, I think me personally and a lot of people I knew went through situations very similar to these. And I think when you think about what stories speak to people, you want stories that people can relate with. And when we started writing the story, at first it's like, God, does anyone really want to relive this awkward period of life? Because it's not, does anyone really want to relive that? And it's like, yeah, you do, especially for people in my generation, because like we were this age in 2001, like my friends and people I know, so this really speaks to us. And, it also is interesting because it speaks to people of other generations too. Because it's like, oh yeah, you can identify, everyone I've talked to that watches the film is like, I know these people, either I was Alex or I was Zach, or I was the little sister, or, I was, Lucy or Nina or one of these people. Like the characters are universal enough that everyone can identify with someone. I think that's why I really wanted to tell the story, is because I wanted to tell something that people could relate to and take something from and just be entertained by.
It's personally for me, the 90s is probably my favorite era, if you could call it that. Music, the way it was the turn of the century, before the what we were all. I mean, we weren't supposed to be here after 1999. Remember? I don't know if you
Sure
remember
do.
what that New Year's was like, but it was crazy. But yeah, it was a really cool era. It had great music. And then at the same time, we didn't have cell phones yet, really. I think we were still using pagers, right? No, not even, yeah.
Yeah, you had cell phones. You did have cell phones.
But they weren't
I
very
certainly
popular
Yeah,
like they are today.
No, not at all. It was just kind of something to call home.
Yeah.
Right?
Did they have text yet, or?
I think very limited, but I don't know anyone that was really texting. Certainly not in 2001 when this movie was set.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, right? Like, what were relationships like before there was texting and Tinder and these other things that I probably don't even understand. But what was that like in this kind of simplistic era? And at the same time, we chose to set the movie in 2001 because if this was to be a longer some kind of series or television series, like that sets up a lot of interesting stories from that time period to kind of start with this one. So it's an interesting time for these relationships to be starting, because if you think about having this as a series, like a progression of time, you have a lot of interesting events that come up, right? I mean, 9/11, you've got the Facebook coming out, the iPhone coming out, like a lot of interesting technology things that play into people's
MySpace.
lives. Right. Whatever that is.
Napster.
Right. Napster. Yes.
Yeah. I remember everybody used to do torrent and all that stuff, and websites were completely different than they are today.
Right.
They were mostly all text, and they were the colors of the backgrounds. Everybody's website had all played with the colors of the text because there really weren't that many images on the websites. And yeah, it was a trip, huh? So when you were filming your film, because it was set in a different time, did you worry about like, hey, don't make sure you don't get that car in the shot or anything like that because it wasn't from the right era? I mean, did you work on anything like that or?
Oh yeah, definitely try to be conscious of things like cars, and I'm sure, if you went through with the fine tooth comb, you could probably find some that, we missed. But things like cars, and you want to make sure there's no flat screens in the shots. You want to make sure that the music was another huge thing too, right? Because not only do we have the soundtrack, the score of the movie, but we also had songs that, were meant to be evocative of pop songs from the time period. So, we're not going to shell out for a Britney Spears song or an NSYNC song, but how do you find music that makes you feel similar to the way those songs feel, that doesn't sound modern, that sounds of that time period? So that was a challenge too, but also getting the right sound for the music. And here I have to obviously point out that our composer, Alex did a really great job in finding the right sound for the movie, because I think the music
sets
really
the
makes
mood.
It right. It sets the mood. It establishes the right themes. It does everything a good soundtrack should do.
Yeah.
But it really puts you into that time period.
Yeah, did you watch Boyhood?
I have not seen that yet.
There's the songs in that movie. I think whenever they changed, it's following one family through, in real life almost, right?
Yeah.
And every time they go through a change, right? Like, oh, now it's a couple years later or something like that, and you see the kids grow from little kids to teenagers, and you're going through that, and the times, if you just close your eyes, you can see the change through the music that they selected through it. It was really cool. So yeah, definitely give him another shout out, a big shout out. Your composer.
Yes, Alex, great job. I mean, there's so many people I could give shout outs to. I mean, I have to give a big shout out to.
Yeah, go ahead and do that and name your actors and your crew now, because they definitely deserve. I mean, I don't know that they're all going to come to San Diego, but at least maybe in this podcast you can give them a little shout out.
Yeah. So our main cast, Roan Ricker, who plays Alex, he actually won an award from a festival for this performance. First acting award he's ever won. He's very young, so I'm sure he'll win a lot more. But
wow, congratulations!
Obviously carries the film. Lacey Gatling, Kaylin Malley, Anthony Giordano. So they make up the main four folks you see, the four kids. Adeline Howitt, her first movie, she plays the little sister in the movie, does a great job. Yeah. And then there's Sam Williamson, who plays the father. Unfortunately, we had to lose Sam for the shortcut, but he's a really great actor, and he actually just released his own film called Burying Mitchell, which is already getting into a bunch of festivals as well. So we had a great cast, and that was something we worked really hard on, is finding the right people, because
chemistry.
Chemistry is really important in this movie, and we've gotten some really good reviews saying how strong the chemistry is from the actors. And actually, that was a really interesting part of the process. Is when we did auditions for the actors, I think we had 2 or 3 different people for each role, and so we had them audition on their own, but then we had them audition in pairs as well. So we had, an Alex audition with a Nina, and then we had a different Alex audition with the same Nina, and then we had, the reverse of that. So we tested different combinations of actors to find the right group of people that would work together, that would be believable as friends and as, romantic partners in the movie. So, and you can see the results of that, because the film works because the cast is so strong.
Oh,
And then on the crew,
definitely.
right?
You could see that right in the first couple of scenes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you feel it right away. And they continued that, which is great too. Like, I've seen that they continue to hang out like outside the film, like they're still friends. They cheer each other on social media, and they have good relationships, which is great. And then on the crew side, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think social media does allow people who go to physical, real life events together to continue that. I think there is some magic in that. That's for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And then on the crew side, so it's some really great people working on the crew side of the movie. Beth Wickman, really good friend of mine, produced a few of my movies in California. Wasn't able to produce this one, but she helped so much in the writing of this movie in terms of just being someone to bounce ideas off of and to help make the script as strong as it could be. I mean, we went through 10 drafts of the script, so we wanted to make sure the script was really, really good. Yeah, that's all. We wanted to make sure the script was really good before we put it into production. So we worked really hard on it. So could not have gotten the movie done without her. She gave great feedback to me all along the process. She really helped me refine the cut that is going to San Diego. So huge partner there. Another partner of mine, Grant Turner, I made a bunch of films with him, and he helped on this project, just kind of doing everything. First AD, he gripped, he was a production. I mean, he did everything. We had a great makeup artist and wardrobe coordinator named Natalie Sutton. So she made sure the actors weren't freezing to death when we shot them on a 25-degree day outside in Kansas City. Kept everyone looking really great. And then, Alex, I mentioned earlier, did the soundtrack. He did a really great job. And we had a colleague of mine named Derek Sellens who did the special effects, color work, and another colleague of mine from California named Beth Hubbard who did all the sound design and mixing. So, I mean, there's a lot of people that work on film, as you can imagine, as you know. Yeah. And we had a lot of really great people that worked on this one.
And you also did the editing on the phone, right? So
yeah, interesting story with that. Right? I did, and the reason I did it, so the iPhone lets you shoot in 4K, really high resolution, which you don't really need to do. And I just saw an article today about there's no reason to shoot in 4K still, but I did it because I could. And when I went to edit the movie on my computer wasn't fast enough to edit the video.
I've had that problem.
Shoot, what am I going to do? And then I found this app on the iPhone called LumaFusion, which is a pretty high-end editing application that you can use on your phone and your iPad. I was like, well, I'll give this a try, and I started playing around with it, and it worked. So I had to do the whole movie on my phone.
What I've done before, I had that problem, but actually it wasn't even shot with a phone. It was shot with a DSLR. It was a project I worked on for somebody else, because I do that sometimes too. I kept telling this guy, I was like, it's going to slow down, my computer. We're talking about all these clips and everything. And so, because I brought it into iMovie, what I did was I used QuickTime. So I opened it with QuickTime, and then I exported it from QuickTime in full HD, and then trimmed just what I needed, and then brought them into iMovie, and then everything was fine.
Yeah, I guess for me, I didn't want to lose the quality, because some festivals want a digital cinema package, which you have to have at least 2K resolution to make one of those. So I'm like, I can't downgrade the res, of the files.
Yeah, but it was shot in 4K, and it still looked great.
Yeah.
So, and then when I exported it, it was still regular, and he submitted it into film festivals, and it worked. Mm-hmm. But the other thing I wanted to ask you was, so what was it called again?
LumaFusion.
LumaFusion. Holy cow. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that all over the place, but for some reason when I went to word it out, I got tongue-tied. So, and then you said you had somebody help you with the colors, coloring and everything?
Yes.
And so then you exported it from that editing app into something he could work with?
Yeah, I mean, I exported the files just as, the highest resolution
Right.
possible I could give him, and then just, put them in a Google Drive folder, and he downloaded them. He did the work on his end and then sent them back to me.
Cool. Awesome. And then the last thing you did was do the audio sweetening, as we call it, right?
Yes. So we had a couple different things we had to do on that. One is we had to re-record a bunch of the audio through ADR on my computer, through same sound setup that the film used. We had to sync all that, and then our sound designer had to take all the audio and add in, background effects and smooth out all the transitions, all that kind of fun stuff. Making sure the audio sounded all the same levels. So that was done in a different application, Pro Tools.
Cool. I remember Pro Tools from college on the radio. The reason why I wanted to make sure that we mentioned all that is because a lot of people, it's about shooting it with the iPhone, but there's some other processes to complete your film to get the quality of a film like what you guys did.
Yeah, and that's, I think we got a bit technical at the beginning of this, but I really wanted people to know, because I would want to know, like, what are all the different tools that you used on this? Because it wasn't just the phone, right? There's lenses, there's stabilizers, there's lights, there's microphones, and then, there is tools, software, in addition to what's on your phone. Not saying you can't, if there's a will, there's a way, right? You could find a tool to do this kind of thing on your phone. We just chose to go a different path.
Plus, and this is the thing that, I teach workshops and things like that. And I do tell people, you can know all this stuff that you just talked about right now. But if you don't know how to structure a story and you don't have a good story, none of that is going to get people to talk about and think about and your film in the long run.
Right. And that's why it doesn't matter what you shoot on. It doesn't matter if you shoot on an iPhone or if you shoot on a DSLR or if you shoot on, a flip phone from, 2008 or whatever, it doesn't matter, right? The story is what matters, right? If you have a good story, if you have good performances, if you have good lighting, it doesn't matter what camera you shoot on.
And the performances are also key. That goes hand in hand, which is one of the reasons why when I talk to actors, why, especially really good actors that can choose and be a little choosier, and they'll say that the reason why they chose to be a part of a film that was shot with an iPhone for the first time ever, which they wouldn't have considered before, was because when they read the screenplay, it was an awesome story and they wanted to be a part of that. So
yeah, well, and it's funny because none of the people that were in this movie knew that I was going to shoot. I didn't advertise it. I didn't say, hey, we're shooting this movie on an iPhone. It's just they showed up to set and here's an iPhone. So this is what it is.
Right? That's awesome. Okay, Now I want to play a little game with you. It's that shout out 20-second game. And let me turn on my timer. Guess what I'm using for my timer?
I hope it's an iPhone.
It is too. It's my iPhone. What I want to do is for you to give a shout out to maybe some 90s teens, things that typical 90s teens used to do, which teens today probably don't do or even know about, maybe. What do you think?
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, so I'm going to give you 20 seconds to do that, and I'm going to do all the hard work. I'm just going to push the button here and time it, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, ready? Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
And go.
All right, the first thing, I don't know if there's a competition to say how many things you can name, but riding bikes. You never see kids riding bikes anymore. Playing Nintendo 64 because it doesn't exist anymore is another thing. Just being outside. You never see kids outside anymore doing anything. Yeah, didn't make it very far.
I'm curious now. What was the last one you were gonna mention?
I was thinking of it as I was saying it, and I don't even know if I got that far.
Okay, fair enough. It was a little loud, the alarm. Awesome. Hey, give me or give our listeners, I should say, a reason because we just talked for almost an hour here, and we talked about all this hard work that you did, because obviously this was not a piece of cheesecake. So if you don't mind, give our listeners a real reason, something that they would say, you know what, it's all been worth it for you.
Why it's been worth it to me to do this?
Yeah. To
Okay.
turn your story into a film and then shoot everything with a phone.
Yeah. Before I do that, I have to give one more shout out to my wife and my son, who, without their support, I couldn't have done any of this. So really important to have a good support system. Have to give them a big shout out as well.
How old is your son?
He is 11 months old.
Aw, he's going to be a year old.
He is.
In April. Awesome.
Yes.
I won't ask you how old your wife is. That doesn't matter.
Thank you. or me.
Or you.
Your question, why is it worth it? If you are really passionate about something and you really want to do something, just seeing that through from beginning to finish is the reward, right? Saying, I'm going to do something, whatever it is, and finishing it. I mean, I don't think there's really anything that's more satisfying than saying, like, I accomplished what I set out to do. So it doesn't matter if it's, I'm going to make a movie on an iPhone, or I'm going to, write a book, or I'm going to draw a painting, or, whatever it is, right? If you say, I'm going to do this, and you work every day on it, or however often you can, and you finish it, and that's the reward. And hopefully there are more, rewards beyond that. Like for us, we've gotten a lot of accolades. We've gotten into some film festivals. We've won several awards for the film. We're going to your festival, so those are all great rewards as well. But, the great thing about filmmaking, I read a really great quote once when I was first starting out. And it was this guy who's making movies. And he was like, you know what? I don't care if I'm sitting in my living room by myself with a tub of popcorn. At the end of the day, I'm watching a movie that I made myself, and that's reward enough. And I think the ends justify the means, basically, and just accomplishing what you set out to do is an amazing thing.
Wow, you can't see the grin on my face. That was a beautiful answer. And yeah, it is inspiring, especially it's almost like we were talking earlier about the challenges and why we take those challenges, and the more experiences like that we take, when we see them through, it does make it all worth it, for sure.
Absolutely.
Not to get too soft here, but I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person and to you sharing more of this in our film festival. And where can people? We're going to add, the link on the notes, but and we're going to write an article about this as well. But if you don't mind sharing that with our listeners, the Facebook page for the film.
Yes, it's facebook.com/AFF movie.
Do you have any other, any websites or anything like that they can go to, or?
No, I don't currently. I thought about putting up a website for the film, and, at the end of the day, it's like, do people really still do that? Everything we have is on social media. It's all on Facebook. So, we may eventually have a website for the movie, but right now it's all on Facebook. So you can find the stills and trailer and all the latest news, and you can connect with me and with the other people that worked on the film through our Facebook page.
Yeah. So for all our listeners, go to AFF Movie on Facebook, and make sure you give them a like. And speaking of liking, although I don't really like to, but we're going to have to say goodbye now to everybody. Say goodbye, John.
Yeah, Susie, thanks so much for having me on. Thanks everyone for listening. Please check us out when we're in San Diego in April, and hope to meet you guys all there.